Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Friday, October 6th, 2023. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Congress mulls ways to get more Ukraine aid. So in the wake of Kevin McCarthy's ouster as Speaker, pro-proxy war lawmakers in the House and the Senate are mulling ways to authorize more Ukraine aid. According to Defense News, multiple senators have proposed passing a massive aid package that would fund the proxy war through 2024. So it would not be impacted by next year's elections. And this plan would mean passing significantly more funding than the $24 billion that President Biden has requested. So far, Congress has authorized about $113 billion in spending on the conflict, and that's covered a little more than a year and a half. So this would take a massive amount of money to cover the whole year of 2024. On Sunday, Senator Lindsey Graham said that it would take about $60 or $70 billion to get Ukraine through 2024. Again, significantly more than the $24 billion that Biden has requested. Senator John Tester, he's a Democrat from Montana. He's the chair of the Senate Defense Appropriations Committee. He said the package that they're considering would fund the war for 15 months. Bringing it into 2025. So I would guess around $70 billion is what they would try to pass if this is the plan that they go with. And this would help the Biden administration's plans to continue supporting an open-ended conflict. I think they would probably be very happy about this if this happens. Now, this would be tough to get through the House, of course, with everything that's going on. But basically their thinking here is, which is probably true, is that the opposition is going to grow. Especially as we approach the 2024 election season. It's definitely going to be a big election issue, especially if Trump is running and saying he's going to end the war. You know, it's going to put pressure on more Republicans to have that position as well. So they're thinking, all right, let's try to get this thing through. We'll do whatever we can, and then we'll be good for 15 months. We can keep this war going. You know, doesn't matter that the counteroffensive failed. Let's just keep pouring money and weapons into this conflict. So Defense News also reported that numerous House Republicans are floating the idea of tying the Ukraine aid to more spending for border security to entice GOP holdouts. So some House Democrats have expressed opposition to the idea, including Adam Smith, Democrat from Washington, who is the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee. He's saying we just have to do straight up and down vote. They want to vote on a bill that's only for the Ukraine spending. So the majority of Congress still supports arming Ukraine. So I think either way, if it's a huge bill worth $70 billion, or if it's smaller and it also includes some border funding, I think if it comes to a vote, I think it's going to pass. The issue that the Hawks have is getting it on the House floor, and that could still be really tricky. It might be pretty hard for them to do that, for that to happen. And again, the other day, Biden hinted that there might be other ways to make money available to keep this thing going. So I'm sure that they're going to find a way to keep fueling this war, but it's not going to be easy for them. And I think we should at least, be happy about that, because there's not much to be happy about usually when I'm going through this news here. All right, so the next one, the EU says that it cannot support Ukraine without the US. So the EU's top diplomat on Thursday said that the European bloc could not provide Ukraine with enough support without the US amid uncertainty about when Congress might authorize the next tranche of spending on the proxy war. So Josep Borrell said after arriving in Spain for a gathering of European leaders, he said, quote, "Europe cannot fill the gap of the US," end quote. So the EU is actually close to approving new economic aid for Ukraine worth 50 billion euros, which is a pretty good chunk of money. And that would cover from 2024 to 2027. So that's 3 years. Again, it just shows the U.S. is thinking about a $70 billion package for a year, and the EU's 50 billion euros would get through 3 years, is what they're thinking. So it shows kind of the massive difference in spending when it comes to the U.S. and the EU, the entire EU. So European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she said that the massive aid package should be approved within the next few months, but said U.S. support still remains crucial. Von der Leyen also said that she was confident that the U.S. would continue supporting Ukraine, but she acknowledged that she was not sure when new spending would be authorized. And we know, officials in Ukraine are kind of scrambling right now, worried that the economic aid that the U.S. gives them to fund their government every month is going to dry up. There's enough for them to get through October, but after that, they're not really sure what they're going to do. So this is kind of more of that, I don't want to say panic, but definitely, these officials in Europe and Ukraine are kind of wondering what they're going to do if the U.S. does not authorize more for this war. All right, so the next one here, growing number of people in the U.S. oppose sending more arms to Ukraine. So this is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. A new poll by Reuters shows that 41% believe Washington should continue to send arms to Kiev. And this 2-day Reuters poll found, so it's 41% of Americans support sending more arms, while 35% oppose further military assistance. So in this poll, more favor sending arms, but it's not, it's only 41%. The same survey that was conducted in May showed 46% of Americans backed sending arms, while 29% were opposed. And so this is kind of shows the difference in polls. It really matters how they frame the question. There was that CNN poll that found the majority of Americans did not want to send more weapons to Ukraine. Well, the way that they asked the question was, do you support Congress authorizing more money to spend on the Ukraine war? And I believe it was 52% said no. And I think, again, it shows the difference in question. This saying, do you support continuing to send arms to Ukraine? They say, oh, yeah, keep sending arms. But if they ask, do you support spending more money, authorizing more money, people might not realize that Congress has to authorize all these billions of dollars to keep this thing going. I think it is a better question to ask if you support more money being made available. So Kyle has that in here. So actually that CNN poll, it was 55% of the respondents said that they did not want Congress to pass another aid package. And of that number, it was 71% of Republicans. All right, so the next one here, Putin says that Prigozhin's plane was not downed by external impact. So Russian President Vladimir Putin said Thursday that Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin's plane was not downed by an external impact, and he claimed that grenade fragments were found in the recovered bodies. So Putin said, quote, "The head of the investigative committee briefed me just the other day. Fragments of hand grenades were found in the bodies of those killed in the crash. There was no external impact on the plane, and this is an established fact, the result of an examination that was conducted by the Russian Investigative Committee," end quote. So if you remember when Prigozhin's plane first crashed, there was rumors from U.S. officials, also on Russian Telegram channels and stuff, it wasn't just coming from the U.S., that, a Russian surface-to-air missile, air defense missile, shot down the plane. But then U.S. officials also were saying, they were saying a lot of things to the media. You had some saying the plane was shot down, and then others said it was probably a bomb that was planted on the plane, so it was an internal explosion. Putin saying fragments of hand grenades. I don't know what that would suggest, if somebody on the plane did it or something. But either way, he also, Prigozhin's death came about 2 months after his short-lived mutiny against the Russian military establishment. But the Kremlin has insisted that Putin was not involved, calling the Western allegations that he was lies. So we don't really know who killed Prigozhin. Putin is certainly a top suspect, I would say. But I know some people think maybe it was somebody else within the Russian military, because it was kind of that's who Prigozhin launched his mutiny against, was more so, Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, and other military brass. And he did kill some Russian airmen in that brief uprising that him and his Wagner fighters had. I'm sure some people have other theories that maybe it was Western intelligence or Ukraine. Fact is, we don't know for sure. So another thing that Putin said that was interesting was he suggested that Prigozhin and the other Wagner members who died in the crash might have been on drugs. He said that there should have been drug tests of the bodies. There should have been tests of whether alcohol or drugs were present in the blood of the deceased. He also claimed that 5 kilograms of cocaine was found by the Russian FSB in Prigozhin's office in St. Petersburg. So he's saying they should have been tested, and that could also mean the pilot, the person that was flying the plane, should have been tested. But it is clear it's not like it's not the pilot's fault for the crash, because there was an explosion. That much seems to be clear, because now you have Putin saying there's grenade fragments, so something definitely exploded. But yeah, so the mystery around Prigozhin's death continues. All right, so the next one here, 80 killed by drone strike on Syrian military college. So at least 80 people have been killed in a drone attack that targeted a graduation ceremony at a military college in Syria's central Homs province on Thursday. So the Syrian government said that members of the armed forces and civilians were among the casualties. Health Minister Hassan Gabag said that the 80 people killed included 6 women and 6 children, and 240 were wounded. So the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, they put the death toll higher, saying that over 100 people were killed, but that number has not been confirmed. The official number, the latest that I saw, the death toll could increase, but the latest that I saw was the Syrian Health Ministry confirmed that 80 people were killed. And they said that casualty number was based on initial data, again, meaning that it could rise. So Syria's defense minister was actually present at this graduating ceremony, but reports say that he left about 20 minutes before the drone attack hit. In a statement, Syria's military said the attack was conducted by armed terrorist organizations supported by well-known international parties. The Syrian government did not blame a specific group, but there was reports of Syrian government strikes on the northwestern Idlib province, which is mainly controlled by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is an al-Qaeda offshoot. But there's all sorts of other groups there. There's Turkish-backed groups in Idlib. And according to the Cradle, the Syrian army targeted the headquarters of the Turkish Islamic Party, which is an extremist Uyghur group that's based in Idlib that wants to establish an Islamic state in China's Xinjiang region. So there's this group of Uyghurs in Idlib, and apparently that's who they might have been targeting in these strikes. So we'll see if they do come out with an official, naming a group that they think was responsible for this. Again, there's a lot of suspects because there's all sorts of militias and terrorist groups, and there's just Syria is always getting bombed by Israel. I mean, there's no indication that Israel was behind this drone strike. I shouldn't say drone strike. It was a kamikaze drone that was laced, laden with explosives. But a lot of people were killed, and again, it was a graduation ceremony, so people's, it was for military officers graduating this college, so people's families were there. It was an event attended by a lot of civilians. All right. So the next one here, the U.S. says that it shot down a Turkish drone in northeast Syria. So a U.S. F-16 fighter jet shot down an armed Turkish drone over northeast Syria on Wednesday. This is according to a U.S. official speaking to the Wall Street Journal. There was a lot of other reports about this as well. So the Turkish Defense Ministry apparently denied that this was a Turkish drone, but they didn't say whose it could have been. U.S. officials said that it was identified as belonging to Turkey, and it was believed to be armed and was operating too close to U.S. troops in northeast Syria. So if this U.S. account is correct, this marks the first time that the U.S. downed an aircraft belonging to Turkey, which is a NATO ally. And this just shows what a mess U.S. policy in Syria is, what the U.S. occupation is. The U.S. and Turkey have long been at odds over U.S. support for the Kurdish-led SDF in northeast Syria, which Ankara considers an offshoot of the PKK. And the PKK is a Kurdish militant organization, and they just took credit for a suicide bombing that hit Ankara on Sunday. So in response to the suicide attack, Turkey has been targeting Kurdish sites in northern Iraq, and Turkish airstrikes were reported in Syria on Thursday, with the SDF saying that at least 9 people were killed in the Turkish attacks. So on Wednesday, Turkey said that the attackers in Ankara, the suicide bombers, entered Turkey through Syria, and Turkey's foreign minister said, quote, "All infrastructure, superstructure, and energy facilities that belong to the PKK and the YPG, especially in Iraq and Syria, are legitimate targets of our security forces, armed forces, and intelligence units from now on," end quote. So they said the YPG. The YPG is the main military wing of the SDF, which is the group that controls most of northeast Syria that's backed by the U.S. So again, I mean, it just really shows all this stuff still going on in Syria. You know, all these years later, the U.S. is still occupying the country, still has them under these brutal sanctions. A good amount of Idlib is still occupied by Al-Qaeda and other organizations. And, you know, that is kind of de facto backed by Turkey and the U.S. You know, they want to keep Syria out of that province, even though it's mainly controlled by an Al-Qaeda affiliate. It's just insanity. So, you know, it seems like there's been a lot of news coming out of Syria lately. And there's still in northeast Syria, in eastern Deir ez-Zor province, the clashes between the SDF and the Arab tribes. So it seems like every corner of Syria, there's something going on. All right, so the next one here, Japan sues Okinawa governor to force a U.S. base construction. So Japan's land minister has sued Okinawa Governor Deni Tamaki in an effort to force the construction of a landfill needed to relocate a U.S. base on the island. And this is a project that the majority of Okinawans oppose. So the idea of suing Tamaki is that would give the government of Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, Japan's central government, is trying to give itself the power to approve the construction without the governor of the prefecture approving it. So the construction is part of a plan to relocate U.S. Marine Corps Air Station Futenma from Ginawan, Okinawa to Henoko, which is a coastal area of the island, which isn't as populated. So there's a lot of concerns here why they don't want to build this base. First of all, they just want the bases out of there. Okinawa hosts the vast majority of U.S. military bases in Japan. I believe it's something, I should have put this figure in the story here, but I think it's something like 70% of American bases on Japanese territory are in Okinawa. And so people are opposed to this, and this is a burden on the residents of Okinawa, and they have long opposed the plan to move this Marine Corps base to another location within Okinawa. They want it to move out of Okinawa. So in a 2019 referendum, 72% of voters opposed the construction of the landfill that's needed to move the Futenma base to Henoko. So a poll in 2022 found that 68% of Okinawans feel that their opinions on U.S. bases in their prefecture are being ignored. So I didn't get too into the details here. Basically, at one point, Japan's government did have the authority to begin construction to move this base. But when they began the work in 2019, they found soft ground and it required a new construction plan. And Tamaki, the governor who ran on, his opposition to U.S. bases, he has refused to approve this new construction. So at the end of the story here, I just mentioned the casualty figures during the Battle of Okinawa between the U.S. and Japan in 1945. According to the Okinawa Peace Memorial Museum, they have a count 100,049,584 civilians were killed during this battle. About 150 civilians killed, and the pre-war population was something like 450. So it's about 1/3 of the population of Okinawa was killed in that battle. And, if you live on Okinawa and you see what's happening with the U.S. and China right now, in any future war, Okinawa is going to be a major target for Chinese missiles because of all the U.S. military infrastructure that's there. And the U.S. is adding, these new Marine Corps units to Okinawa. Okinawa historically was the Ryukyu Kingdom, and it was annexed by Imperial Japan, I think in 1869, I want to say. And that was actually encouraged by the U.S. because the U.S. encouraged Imperial Japan to become the imperial power in East Asia. So you just look at history, and it's just really unfair what's happened to people of Okinawa, and it just goes against this whole rules-based order nonsense that we always hear about, concerns for sovereignty. They don't care about the Okinawa's sovereignty. The U.S. ended its formal occupation of Okinawa in 1972, but the population has continued to oppose the U.S. military presence. There's also been a lot of trouble with U.S. People in the military, getting arrested there and stuff like that. So it's just an issue I kind of wanted to highlight because I think it's important for people to understand that people in Okinawa, which is going to be a major launch point for U.S. military activity in a future war in the region, the people there don't want us there, don't want the U.S. there. All right, the next one. China warns the Philippines about a resupply mission in the South China Sea. So there was another encounter between Chinese and Philippine vessels in the South China Sea. On Wednesday, Chinese authorities said that they warned boats making an unapproved entry near Second Thomas Shoal, which is a reef claimed by both Manila and Beijing. The Philippine side said that it conducted a successful resupply for troops stationed on the BRP Sierra Madre, which is a World War II era ship that Manila grounded on the shoal in 1999 to assert its claims. And this is Second Thomas Shoal. There's usually a few shoals and reefs that you'll hear about when we're talking about these encounters and this maritime dispute in the South China Sea. And the reason why this is important for me to cover is because the U.S. is very involved in this dispute. They say that the mutual defense treaty that they have with the Philippines applies to attacks on Chinese boats. So if China fires on one of these boats, that means the U.S. could potentially intervene. That potentially means a war between the U.S. and China over these rocks and reefs. So anyway, the Philippine side said that they successfully resupplied this ship. Manila's National Security Council said that they were able to do so despite harassment from these Chinese boats that were attempting to block the resupply. A spokesman for China's Marine Police said that the Chinese Coast Guard warned, followed, and effectively regulated the Philippine vessels. It's unclear if they really tried to block the resupply or if they just kind of got in their way and told them to get out of there, and then they didn't leave. So there's been several encounters around Second Thomas Shoal. In early August, a Chinese vessel fired a water cannon at Philippine boats trying to resupply this ship. So again, just an area, a hot spot for us to keep an eye on, that I think a lot of people ignore, or they just don't realize the commitment that the U.S. has made when it comes to this maritime dispute, and just how the U.S. and the Philippines are increasing their military alliance, more drills, more U.S. bases in the Philippines. It can turn into something pretty bad. And the last one here, senators urge caution on potential Saudi deal. This article is from Ben Armbruster at Responsible Statecraft. And it's about how nearly 24 U.S. senators sent a letter to President Biden on Wednesday expressing concern about reports of a potential American security guarantee for Saudi Arabia that has been reported to be part of a larger normalization deal with Israel. So they're concerned that Saudi Arabia is requesting a security guarantee from the United States in exchange for normalization with Israel. So at least there's some opposition to this. So it's about 20 senators who say they're concerned about it. So hopefully that opposition grows, because a mutual defense treaty with Saudi Arabia would not be good. That's it for the news for today. Go check out our Viewpoints, one from Ted Snyder. Are Eastern European cracks appearing in NATO unity? One from Karen Greenberg, last prisoners at Guantanamo. One from John Reynolds, 20 years later, an update from Iraq. There is no future here for my children. One from Doug Bandow, in a fight for democracy, Biden administration sides with autocracy. And our spotlight is from William Hartung and Dylan Fisher. When 80% of U.S. generals go to work for arms makers. That's a pretty serious statistic there. But that is everything. You could always help us out by sharing this show, telling your friends about antiwar.com, commenting, giving me feedback. All that stuff helps out. This is the last show for the week. I will be back after the weekend. I hope everybody has a good one. Thanks for listening.